Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Jarvis. The reason why I'm doing this video is to go and revisit the Commander Banlist. This is preempted by the fact that they just announced 4 new bannings. They have announced Dockside, Jewel Lotus, Mana Crypt, and Nadu Winged Wisdom. We're going to go and visit what I feel about those bannings, and the entire ban list in general, and whether the card should be banned or unbanned. As a disclaimer, I am largely for the fact of unbanning cards and having a small ban list. And I also dislike green, so if it's a green card and I'm on the edge, it's more likely going to be keep it banned than unbanned. So let's get into it. The first card we're going to go and visit is Jeweled Lotus. The reasoning from the RC that this card is banned is that it can give you 5 mana on turn 2. It does it without even needing a good hand, though you're restricted in what you can do with the mana. 4 and 5 mana commanders can pack a significant punch nowadays, often draw cards to make up for the one-shot mana, and defensive abilities such as Ward can't be interacted with that early in the game. My opinion on this is you want to have explosive turns in Commander. That's part of the fun of playing the format. This allows you to have those explosive turns. I am completely for having this unbanned. I do not think that this should be banned, and you will see that with a lot of the cards that were announced of being banned so far. Mana Crypt was banned for much of the same reason. Coming down for no mana on turn 1, it's quite possible to have the explosive start of Mana Crypt into a Signet or Talisman, land, and another Signet, leaving that player untapping 5 mana on turn 2. In games going 12 plus turns, the accumulated threat of damage from Mana Crypt provides a reasonable counterbalance for its explosive effect, but when you're snowballing to a turn 6 to 8 win, it's a meaningless drawback. So, with Mana Crypt, what they described is the magical Christmas hand that very frequently does not happen. This is a card that doesn't see play in casual Commander a ton. It does see play some, because they made it readily available in the Ixalan packs and Double Masters, so it has been reprinted recently. However, and then also Mystery Boosters. So within the past 4 years, it's gotten 3 reprints. So it is played more than some other cards would be. However, having those explosive starts is part of the fun of Commander. And while this could go and turn you into 5 mana on turn 2, they won't ban Soul Ring, even though Soul Ring could do very much the same thing into turn 1 land, Soul Ring, Signet, leaving you with 5 mana on turn 2. Turn 6 to 8 wins, I really feel like that's a high-powered casual Commander game. Games that go 12 plus turns aren't games that I'm interested in playing, and a lot of people that I play with aren't interested in playing. They want the game to be over by typically turn 10. Because a 10-turn game in Commander is probably about an hour and a half-ish game. When you go and get to those 12-turn games, you are going into that 2-hour mark, and people don't want to be playing for that long. I am very much for unbanning this card. Now we have Nadu Winged Wisdom. Out of all the cards that were announced to be banned, Nadu is probably the one that I am the most okay with being banned. It's been ejected from multiple formats. It's no surprise they took a close look at it for Commander. And sometimes hugely problematic cards in other formats, like Oko and Companion, are fine for Commanders. But they said Nadu's inherent play patterns is that it's going to cause problems. Part of the problem is the way in which it wins, where it takes a really long time to do non-deterministic sequences that can't be shortcut and might eventually fizzle out. These aren't dedicated combo lines that you have to build a deck around. Dropping Nadu into a normal Simic shell still runs the risk of grinding the game down to a slog of resource accrual. It interacts badly with cards that are staples of casual play, most notably Lightning Greaves, meaning that decks where it gets thrown into without abuse of tech can still create a situation where the player is monopolizing all the time in the game. And that's not an experience they want to risk, so Nadu itself gets another ban. So, I understand where they're coming from. However, Nadu in just generic Simic shells and Sultai shells isn't going to be that effective. Sure, you still have Lightning Greaves, but Lightning Greaves, in my opinion, has been falling out of favor because there are so many spells and effects that target your commander that people don't want to run Lightning Greaves anymore because of the Shroud ability. I understand that this is a miserable commander to play against, and that's why it's been pretty much relegated to high power pods and mostly CDH pods. Well, personally, I would want this card to be unbanned. I am okay with them keeping it banned. It does go and play into miserable play patterns. I would be okay with it. I think it could be unbanned, but I'm okay with them keeping it banned. Now, this one is the one that affects me the most on the entire list from the 4 new cards. Dockside Extortionist. Dockside isn't normally quite as explosive in the early game as the other 2 cards, meaning Mana Crypt and Jewel Lotus, but it still can go mana positive on turn 2 and start generating substantial treasures after that. It's been on the border for years, and we've shied away from taking action in the past because the card has scaled well with the power level of the table. But it's a frequent contributor to the more egregious snowballing starts. So when it comes to Dockside, this is the one that affects me personally the most. I have a 5-color treasures deck. I have a mono red deck that I play this in. I have always been on the keep Dockside legal in Commander because it does scale well with the power level of a table. In lower powered and casual pods, while you still have mana rocks, it's a much slower game that you might get a soul ring into a signet, but typically Dockside on like a turn 4 or 5 is still only generating like 5 to 6 treasures. Whereas in a higher power table, Dockside is generating 15 to 20 treasures, if not more, on turn 4 or 5. I personally would want this to be unbanned, just because I really love the card. However, this is another one of those cards where personally I'd want to unban, but I'm okay with them keeping it banned. It does produce miserable play patterns for tables. I understand it does devolve into a bit of what the primetime problem is, which we'll get to later, where it turns into copying the Dockside. Dockside loops are a thing. It's really easy to abuse. I'm okay with them not having this be legal in the format. Now we're getting to the cards that were banned previously. And these are all going to just be in alphabetical order. We're starting off with Ancestral Recall. Ancestral Recall was originally banned for poor optics rather than power level. While it's plenty powerful, it's the effect on perceived barrier to entry that really poses a problem because casual players watching Commander games in passing could reasonably assume that they needed hundreds, now thousands of dollars in Power 9 mana as terrible stakes just to join the format. Ancestral Recall was an iconic and expensive card at the time it was banned, and removing it from the card pool was intended to combat the notion that Commander is a prohibitively expensive and inaccessible format. So, the reasoning for bannings I don't agree with. I don't think any card should be banned for perceived cost or entry into the format or power level. However, I think a 1 mana draw 3 is a good enough reason to keep it banned. It is too powerful of a card for the format. 1 mana draw 3 just does too much. Especially when cards, even like Brainstorm, when it's 1 mana, draw 3, put 2 back, are still really powerful. I just don't like having cost be part of the equation. Balance. On its face, Balance looks like a very effective catch-up strategy that's mechanically very white, but in practice it leads to slow, long games with a low density of meaningful decisions or memorable events. Players are often left with little to no resources and little to no cards in hand, feeling like they don't have any agency in the game they're playing. So, For those that don't know, balance, each player chooses a number of lands he or she controls equal to the number of lands controlled by the player who controls the fewest, then sacrifices the rest. Players discard cards and sacrifice creatures the same way. So essentially what this means is that everybody gets reset to the lowest number of creatures, lowest number of lands, and lowest number of cards in hand. This is a card that is pretty much illegal everywhere that it would have been legal in. I personally would be okay with this card. It is a very white card. It does what white wants to do in the format. However, something that we have to keep in mind, just like I said, people don't really like 2-hour games. This effectively resets the game for 2 mana. So you could get into a turn 6 right after an actual board wipe and reset everyone to 0 creatures, like 3 cards in hand, and 4 to 5 lands. That play pattern is a reason why this should stay banned. Now, Biorhythm. Biorhythm is an 8-mana sorcery that can appeal to deck builders as a fair and funny haymaker, but the reality is that it usually results in a disappointing twist to the game, ignoring previous gameplay to wipe 100 plus life off the board. Wrath effects are a core element of casual metagames, and most often Biorhythm results in the accidental elimination of players rather than a strategic payoff. So, Biorhythm, eliminating players, I think, is the strategic payoff. People want to go and use this to go and reset life totals to a very low life. I am of the opinion that almost all cards that are 7 plus mana should be legal in Commander. Sure, 8 mana in green is something that can very easily be done as early as turn 3. However, if they're casting this turn 3 or 4, they haven't got a chance to build their board state up to take full advantage of Biorhythm. So this is still a late game card where they are going to go and cast this to go and close out the game. As much as this pains me to say, I think Biorhythm should be unbanned. Black Lotus. So Black Lotus is going to have a lot of the same reasoning as Ancestral Recall. It's banned for poor optics rather than power level. It's the same exact reason as Ancestral Recall. With them going and saying that fast mana is bad and using that reasoning, Black Lotus should stay banned. Even if you take out the reasoning that fast mana is banned, Black Lotus should still probably be banned. It's really simple. You take the most powerful card ever, you want it to stay banned. Braid's Cabal Minion. Braids has a tendency to create fully locked down board states and ends game early in a remarkably unsatisfying way. Braids removes resources aggressively, meaning players are unable to keep the resources needed to remove it. It was first banned as Commander in 2009. Then when they removed banned as Commander and just changed to banned, it was removed in 2014 to just being on the general ban list. So when it comes to Braids, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices an artifact, creature, or land. Even now, with this banning, it is very easy to get Braids down on turn 2. Not so much on turn 1. You still could do it with like land, Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual. Would still get it down on turn 1. But at the beginning of each player's upkeep, you're doing that. If it gets played early, you're pretty much going and making it that you have to sacrifice your own Braids. So it really doesn't make a ton of sense. I'm okay with Braids being unbanned. I understand that the play patterns could be very exhausting to play against. However, I don't think it's as bad as it might have once been with the other powerful commanders that we've had printed. Channel. Channel is a card, for sure. It abuses two important aspects of the format. Higher life totals make the life payment essentially trivial if this is played in the early game, and players always have something to do with the mana, i.e. cast their commander. Channel often catapults its controller way ahead by producing huge amounts of mana. So, 2 green until end of turn, anytime you could activate a mana ability, you may pay 1 life. If you do, add colorless to your mana pool. This is banned for a reason. If you have watched the Vintage Cube on MTGO, people will go and try to get Channel to go and just drop it into huge Eldrazi. It shows why Channel is a problem. I'm okay with Channel being banned. It needs to stay banned. It should be banned. It is not a fair card in any given way. Chaos Orb. Chaos Orb. Cards that require manual dexterity present unique accessibility challenges for the format. We don't want Commander to be a format that you can only play if you engage in specific physical actions. Chaos Orb incentivizes players to physically spread their cards out over a large area in order to minimize the possibility of multiple permanents being affected. At best, this is awkward, and at worst, it adds needless complexity to maintaining the state of the game. So, Chaos Orb is a card that I think, what it does. One, flip it onto the playing area from a height of at least 1 foot. It must turn completely over at least once, or it is discarded with no effect. And when it lands, any cards in play that it touches are destroyed, as is Chaos Orb. It is not a fun card. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. It is a fun card. Because you get to flip a card. It's fun to go and play. It is a needless waste of time card. And I'm big on not wasting time in a game. So this could stay banned. Coalition Victory. This is one that has been seeing a ton of comments recently. Coalition Victory threatens a strongly negative experience largely out of nowhere for a casual table where the game expects to go long enough that a spell such as Coalition Victory will be cast. In general, tapping L at a healthy life total against an opponent with nothing but any 5-color commander in play shouldn't cause you to lose the game unless you have signed up for that kind of experience, in which case Coalition Victory is far from your biggest problem. Steering folks away from this kind of experience is at the heart of what the ban list is trying to accomplish. So what it says is it's 3 and Wooburg, so it's 8 mana. You win the game if you control a land of each basic land type and a creature of each color. This was something that I thought was going to be unbanned for the longest time. And then they printed Leyline of the Guild Pact, which makes all lands, all basic land types, and all creatures, all colors. And I think that kind of stopped it getting unbanned because of them doing that. I really actually think Coalition Victory should be unbanned. It is an 8 mana win the game card. You have to do some setup, even though the setup isn't as hard as it was once to do. You still have to do some setup for it. Because Leyline of the Guild Pact just made it that you could, as long as you get 8 mana, you win the game with a creature in play. Also, 5-color commanders aren't what 5-color commanders were when this was banned. 5-color commanders now are very infrequently actually Wooburg cost. They're 5-color color identity, but not 5-color when it comes to the game. So, because people are now more playing like Kenrith, Joda, stuff like that. And when I say Joda, I mean the Archmage, not the new Joda. They're not playing ones that actually have 5 colors in their casting cost. So I think this one is very easy to unban. I think it would do for the format what Worldfire did, which is absolutely nothing. Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn. Emrakul's collection of game warping abilities come at a high cost, but they have a tendency to effectively win games without explicitly ending them. Emrakul was banned due to overwhelming outcry from the community, who told us that ramping quickly into it was one of the most common and least interesting ways to win. As an amazing colorless finisher, it was too tempting for too many decks. So Emrakul is a 15 mana spell. It can't be countered. When you cast it, you get an extra turn. Has flying, protection from spells that are one or more colors, and Annihilator 6. And it is the Shuffle Emrakul. You know what? Unban this. Unban it right away. Emrakul is a fun card. It's 15 mana. You're ramping into it. 15 mana cards should go and close out games. And just because it doesn't close it out the turn it comes down, or even on the extra turn, it still leads to the game being over. It just takes extra steps. And I'm okay with it taking extra steps. Especially if you, as the opponent, know that this is pretty much ending the game for you, then concede the game. You don't have to play it out. 15 mana spells should do these effects. It's what 15 mana does. Yeah, so unban Emrakul. Areu. Suratami Ascendant. When played as a commander, it leads decks that cast and flip her early, leading to games where even target removal is often ineffective. Worse, a flipped Areu does not always send a strong signal to newer players that the game is essentially over. The natural result is play pattern that is nearly always one-sided and oppressive. So on its normal side, whenever the fourth spell of a turn is played, you flip it. And when it's flipped, counter the first spell played by each opponent each turn. Yeah, this can stay banned. It's 2 mana. And if you have watched Pioneer and Explorer, you know how easy it is to cast 3 or 4 spells a turn, proven by Arclight Phoenix decks. If you want to see how miserable of a play pattern this card makes a game, SEG, on their Commander Versus show, they played a pod of unbanned commanders, and this was so ridiculously oppressive, it made the game unwatchable for me. My control player heart loves the card, but my rational human being knows that this card would just be miserable for everyone involved. Falling Star. Falling Star is the same reason as Chaos Orb. So I'm not going to reread it because it's the exact same reason, but what it does is flip it onto the playing area from a height of at least 1 foot. It must turn 360 degrees, so flip once. When it lands, it does 3 damage to each creature that it touches. Any creature damaged by Falling Star that are not destroyed become tapped. Yet again, this is a time waster, so it could stay banned. Very much for the same reason why I believe that Chaos Orb should stay banned. Fast Bond. It exploits 2 unique and important aspects of the format: the higher life totals, and players always having something to do. Very much channel. It often catapults its controller ahead by producing huge amounts of mana and landfall triggers. So it's a single mana that you may play any number of lands on each of your turns. Whenever you play a land, if it wasn't the first land you played this turn, it deals 1 damage to you. Yeah, this needs to stay banned. You could very easily play this on turn 1, drop 2 to 3 more lands, and have 4 mana on turn 1, and then it doesn't really do anything the rest of the game. But having 4 mana on turn 1 is a problem. Could this be unbanned? Yeah, sure. But I think that the mono green players who love to ramp would not treat this with the respect that it deserves, where it should only be played in high-powered pods. And in high-powered pods, well, mana resources are always good. If you're playing this, you most likely aren't getting more than 2 lands out at a time, so it's probably not played there. So I'm actually talking myself into unbanning this, which is awful. You know what? Yeah. Unban fast bond. I talked myself into it. Unban it. I think it'll be fun. I think let's see what players do with it. See how much they actually abuse it and see where the games go. Flash. I remember this is the first banning. Actually, no, this is the second banning since I came back to Magic, so I remember this one well. Flash effectively allows players to evoke a creature in their hand for 1 or 1 blue. Many other formats have recognized that the mechanism of Flash uses to do this prevents meaningful interaction. Worse, its power is tied to the creatures that are being cheated into play. Its power increases over time as creature designs become more powerful. So if you weren't playing a commander back when Flash was banned, this was an olive branch from the rules committee to CDH. Uh, CDH wanted Flash banned because what CDH became was a turn zero format that they were trying to mulligan into Flash to go and win on turn zero, not even turn one. Because you had Gemstone Caverns that you play turn zero, go and like exile Elvish Spirit Guide into Flash, and it went through multiple loops that got you the win on turn zero. Uh, because of that, and where that olive branch came from, I want to say to keep it banned. I think 2 mana going and sacrificing it, it's fine. It evokes a creature where there are powerful ETBs. But the premise behind this card getting banned was as a olive branch to the most powerful game and most powerful format. So that's why I think it should stay banned. Gifts Ungiven. Feels like a very fun card. Its low blue investment makes it splashable, and the instant speed means you can use it at the most opportune time with lowered chance for countering on interaction. The ability to tutor for 2 combo pieces and 2 ways to recur them generally makes this a 1-card game ender, and even in the most casual play is a double tutor. What it does, you search your library for up to 4 cards with different names and reveal them. Target opponent chooses 2 of those cards, puts the chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest into your hand, then shuffle. This is a 4 mana win the game card, and I don't think win the game should be printed at 4 mana. What you do with this card is you go and you pick 4 cards, and typically 2 of those 4 cards are ways to go and get the other 2 cards back from the graveyard, making it that as long as you have the mana for it, this does go and win the game based off of the 4 cards you tutor. This is a card that should stay banned. It is too powerful for what it does, and it pretty much closes the game out when it's cast. Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. We're now getting to cards that I disagree with. Golos, there are many problems with the card, but the greatest is that in low to middle power level tiers where we focus the ban list, Golos is simply a better choice of leader for all but the most commander-centric decks. Its presence crushes the kind of diversity in commander choice which we want to promote. I'm going to go right now unban Golos. Golos wasn't even the most powerful commander printed in 2019. The most powerful 5-color commander printed in 2019 was Kenrith. And Kenrith is even in high-powered pods, which I know they said they can't concentrate on low to mid-powered pods, was the commander of choice. I understand what they're trying to do with Golos, where Golos it goes and gets back half the commander cost each turn. But Golos wasn't a problem. Golos enabled decks to do things that other 5-color commanders didn't enable them to do. Mostly, it was the #1 Gates commander for a long time for a reason. And I say for a long time, it was only legal for 2 years. Golos should be unbanned. There's no reason it should have been banned in the first place. This was the miss on the rules committee, and I think many of the bannings from 2020 on were misses by the rules committee. Bristlebrand. Its typical play pattern involves cheating it onto the battlefield early to draw an overwhelming number of cards. Its effect is amplified in Commander due to higher starting life totals, its constant availability as a commander, and by the fact that you get the cards in hand immediately after activating its ability. So, it's a 7-mana spell that has flying, lifelink, pay 7, draw 7 cards. Pay 7 life, draw 7 cards. I was never fortunate enough to play with Gristlebrand when it was legal in Commander. I see why Gristlebrand is a problem. However, as a commander, I think it is fair. As a nut card in the 99, it is highly unfair because of Reanimate. You could Entomb Reanimate Gristlebrand as early as turn 2, or if you're lucky enough, turn 1, you could have a Gristlebrand into play. As much as I would love for this to go and be unbanned because I think it's a ton of fun to play with, it needs to stay banned for what it can do in the 99 of deck list, not what it does in the not what it does as the commander. Hole Breacher. Hole Breacher creates an environment of asymmetric resource denial in the early game. Its ability easily combines with several other cards to strip opponents' hands and keep them empty. This creates an environment where players don't have agency but doesn't outright end the game. Combined with its easy splash ability, it was an attractive and popular card to include in decks that were played in environments that couldn't handle it. I don't think Hole Breacher was as bad as they said. It went and punished card draws, and the other cards that did the same effect as Hole Breacher, which essentially denied card draw resources when wheeling or other effects, were still left legal. Narset and Notion Thief. I think Hole Breacher should be unbanned. And this kind of leads into what a lot of my problem with what the Rules Committee has been doing, where they're taking powerful cards that get self-policed out of lower formats and banning them when they are become staples in high-powered formats. Or a high-powered commander. It's the same format. I should say tables instead. Also, it seems that they are punishing ramp more than they are punishing card draw. Because this unlocks card draw, and it ramps you. Hole Breacher, I think, is fine. I'm not going to say it's fair, but I think it's a fine card and should be unbanned. Iona, Shield of Emeria. Its ability to lock entire colors out of the game makes it brutally efficient at removing agency from other players at the table, especially when opponents are playing 1 or 2 color decks. This often has the effect of totally negating 1 or more players' involvement in a game and creates unnecessary social friction. It is a 9-mana card that as it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Your opponents can't cast spells of the chosen color. Where Iona became banned was when they unbanned Pinner Servant, and I do believe that those cards should not be legal in the format at the same time. However, I believe cards that cost 7 and plus mana that lock down the game or end the game should be legal in the format. This essentially ends the game for an opponent for you, giving you a path to winning. Will it be miserable to play against? Yes. That's the nature of being a 9-mana card. Will it be something that you want to do with your friends multiple times? No. You're only going to play this in your saltiest decks. It's not just going to get at it for a ha-ha funny. Unban this card. It is powerful, it's annoying, it does miserable things, but it's appropriately costed for what it does in a color that doesn't really get to that high of a mana value easily. Caracas. It is a format that focuses on legendary creatures that tie together decks thematically. Sorry, how was format made it hard to read. Uh, and Caracas is a land that can both prevent a player from having consistent access to the commander and allow its controller to consistently save the commander from a removal. It does both of those things for a negligibly low activation cost. Yeah, this needs to stay banned. Caracas is a problem. It's on a land. It enables combos with your commander quite easily. Even without your commander, there are so many legendary creatures now that Caracas is just broken. Uh, there's no reason for this to be legal in any way. Leovold, Emissary of Trest. As a commander, creates an environment of asymmetric resource denial in the early game. Its second ability protects itself and other resource denial pieces in play, and its first ability easily combines with several other cards to strip opponents' hands and keep them empty. This creates an environment where players don't have agency, but doesn't outright end the game. Leovold is a 3-mana commander that each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn, and whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. This is actually more fair than Hullbreacher is, because this still Hullbreacher punishes any card draw other than the first one on your turn. This one lets you at least draw a card on each of your opponent's turns. Sure, it protects itself from removal by letting you draw a card, but it doesn't stop the removal. When going down this list and reading through it, I at first was going to say, yeah, let's keep Leovold banned, but I am on the unbanned Leovold page. I think Leovold would be fine in Commander. Library of Alexandria. This was banned for a lot of the same reasons that Ancestral Recall and Black Lotus was banned. It was also banned because of its colorless nature, allowing to go into every deck, and difficulty for inexperienced players to realize that library is the reason they're losing. It adds 1 mana to your mana pool, or it taps draw a card, but you can only activate it if you have exactly 7 cards in hand. My problem with Library of Alexandria is I don't know what it brings to the table if you unban it. It allows you to draw a card whenever you're down to 7 cards in hand, which is very easy to go and manipulate. I just don't, and I never played in any format where this was legal, just because I didn't play when I was a kid. I don't see it being broken in Commander, but I don't see it adding anything positively either, so I'm okay with keeping it banned. Limited resources. It is probably the easiest card on the ban list to justify. It does not scale with the number of players, so as early as turn 2, it effectively reads players can't play any more lands on a 1 mana enchantment. So when it comes to play, each player chooses 5 lands he or she controls and sacrifices the rest. As long as there are 10 or more lands in play, players cannot play lands. You know what? I completely agree with the rules committee on this. This means that at most, each player, 3 players will have 3 lands, and a 4th player, actually no, each player will have 2 lands, and a couple other will have 3 lands. It grinds the game to a halt and makes it into a whenever you go and whoever goes and removes this is probably going to win the game because they're going to wait until they go and do something with it. I think it should stay banned. Lutri the Spell Chaser. Lutri is in a unique category of banned cards that interact poorly with the structure of the format. In general terms, companions encourage creative deck building and reinforce the idea that self-imposed restrictions can be fun and novel. Lutri's restriction is met by nearly all commander decks, so it allows all decks with blue and red to have the 101st card in deck and 8th card in their hand. So, when companions were introduced with Ikoria, they all had their deck building restrictions. Lutri's was each non-land card in your starting deck has a different name. So that pretty much meant any Izzet Commander deck. The only other companion that isn't legal as a companion in Commander is Yorion, and that's because you have to have 20 or more cards in your library, and you have a hard, fast 100 card rule in your deck for Commander, so Yorion doesn't work there. When Companion was first introduced, you could just go and cast it without paying the additional cost to go and put it into your hand. They realized how broken it was, so now you have to pay an additional 3 to put it into your hand. Lutri has Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, in 60 card formats, Companions take up a sideboard slot. To make Companions work in Commander, the RC decided to go and have essentially a Companion zone that didn't take away from your 100 card deck and wasn't a sideboard slot because Commander doesn't have a sideboard. So this made it that this was a day one banning because it was an auto include in all Izzet decks. I think Lutri should be unbanned, but not because of what Lutri itself does. I don't think companions should go and function in Commander as a companion. You should not have an ability to put a 101st card in your deck, especially when you can't play wish spells in your deck because you can't have a sideboard. I have a companion deck, and I like brewing companion decks. I don't think that they should be legal in Commander. If they made it so companions weren't legal in Commander as a companion, you wouldn't have to ban Lutri, and Lutri would be able to go and be free, and everyone could go and play an Izzet Otter that in general actually isn't really that powerful. It's only powerful because it's a free card in Izzet decks when companions are legal. Mox Sapphire. So Mox Sapphire is going to fill in for all the Moxes. The 5-color Moxen were originally banned for poor optics, so cost. They're iconic and expensive cards, and removing them from the card pool was intended to make it that it isn't a prohibitively expensive and inaccessible format. So I am okay with all the Moxen being banned. The Moxen are the fastest of fast mana. They would never have been fair. You could see how broken they are by watching, yet again, Vintage Cube, or even some channels that have done no ban commanders like Goldfish or Commander Versus show what the Mox can do and how incredibly dangerous they are. I'm okay with them staying banned. Panoptic Mirror. Panoptic Mirror's presence on the ban list serves to remind players that most things are fun in moderation. It was and remains banned because of the incidental, often accidental uses which lead to repetitive, boring games. Beyond the obvious extra turns combo, it's a trap for casual deck builders because it seems like a fun value engine. However, too many different 4+ mana spells when printed will grind the game to a halt. Wraths, tutors, discards, even card draw can yield insurmountable advantage and lock up the game. So Panoptic Mirror is 5 mana, it has imprint X, and tap, you may remove an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost in your hand from the game. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may copy an imprinted instant or sorcery card and play the copy without paying its mana cost. I understand why they wanted to ban this. Because, yes, extra turns, wraths, tutors, all of what they mentioned is a problem. However, when you still allow Isochron Scepter to be legal with counter spells and Dramatic Reversal being imprinted on them, you lose all rights to go and keep a card like Panoptic Mirror banned. This is part of the problem where the Rules Committee doesn't fairly apply their logic across all cards. They make signpost bannings like, hey, this is a problem, and hey, we might ban cards like this in the future. Instead of doing that, ban all cards like that or keep them all unbanned. Don't make signpost bannings, apply logic evenly throughout the format. Unban Panoptic Mirror unless you're going to ban Isochron Scepter. Do one or the other. I vote for an unban. Paradox Engine. Paradox Engine can be played in any deck and creates large amounts of mana at little to no deck building cost. Its play patterns often involve long, drawn-out turns of tapping and untapping permanents, drawing cards, and generally monopolizing the chess clock of a game. This is an easy keep banned. So, Paradox Engine was banned in July of 2019. It was banned for a fair reason, especially in decks that played lots of low-cost spells. This could very easily lead to infinite mana, infinite card draw, and pretty much turns that took 30 to 45 minutes without trying. And with it being 5 generic, it could go into any deck. It was most often abused in low-cost decks that were like Urza, Lord High Artificer, but it could go in something as easy as an mono green elf deck. If you have not played Brawl with Paradox Engine, assuming that you never got to play Paradox Engine in Commander, then I highly suggest you doing that, because you then get to see the play patterns that Paradox Engine devolves into. Primeval Titan. In a format where 6 mana spells are par for the course, a card which tutors for any 2 non-basic lands and then demands an immediate answer to prevent its owners from further accelerating from mid to end game is problematic. Even if it's removed immediately, the lands it gets are hard to interact with. The result is that it decides but not ends the game frequently, and when it doesn't, will often become the focal point for the rest of the game as players fight over it. We want Commander games to be decided by who casts the best big spells, and Primetime easily tips those scales. So, Primetime is a 6 mana spell. Trample. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for any 2 lands cards. You put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This is a card that, at 6 mana, feels like it could be fair. However, it's a 6 mana card in green. So this is something that could easily be gotten on turn 2 or 3 in green because of how they ramp. I am okay with this staying banned, because if you don't answer Primetime right away, you aren't answering Primetime because the game is so locked down. And with it being able to get any land, and Field of the Dead being a card that's legal, or, you get Merit Lage, what is it? I'm blanking on. Get the one for Merit Lage and get the copiers, all that stuff. It's easy to understand why this is banned. It also does devolve into who controls the Primetime or who copies the Primetime. So it is a lot of the same thing, like Primetime manipulates the game in much of the same way that Dockside manipulates the game, that we all want a Dockside, we all want a Primetime. So yes, it could stay banned. It's a problem. I'm not sorry. Prophet of Kruphix. Prophet of Kruphix creates a gameplay pattern where the controller of the cards can interact and meaningfully play during each other player's turns. This inevitably leads to one player monopolizing playtime without definitively ending the game. It's a 5 mana Simic card that you untap all creatures and lands you control during each other player's untap steps, and you may cast creature cards as though they had flash. So, Prophet of Kruphix essentially takes a Vedalken Orrery and a Seaborn Muse and pushes them together. I think that is enough to keep it banned, because Seedborn Muse is a good enough card that if they banned Seedborn Muse, I'd be angry about it, but I'd understand it. Prophet of Kruphix is worse than that. Especially with it being in green. Because you're casting creatures. Green cares about creatures being cast, and that's how you draw the majority of your cards in green, is by creatures being cast or entering the battlefield. So this devolves into you going, emptying your hand on your turn, or using all your mana on your turn, really, then going and doing it on each other person's turn. Yet Prophet of Kruphix, stay banned. Recurring Nightmare. Outside of counter magic, it's nearly impossible to stop this card from doing its thing once it gets going because returning it to its owner's hand is part of the cost of activating its ability. If your graveyard is sufficiently stocked, it's entirely possible that once you draw Recurring Nightmare, it is the only spell you'll want to play for the rest of the game. It is a 3-mana enchantment that you sacrifice a creature, return it to your hand, and return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, but you can only activate the ability anytime you can cast a sorcery. I actually think with where Commander is in 2024, that it is fair to unban this card. I understand why it is banned and why it could stay banned, because really it doesn't add anything positive to the game. But I really think that where we are in today's age, with the amount of graveyard hate, with the amount of instant speed interaction, that you have Cross and Grip really that could go and answer this right away without them being able to go and do anything extra. I understand that they're not going to want to leave this on the battlefield when it's not their turn. I don't see the issue with the card in today's power level and with all the other options we have. We have enough graveyard hate, which you should be playing anyway. We have enough interaction for it. And sure, this can go and take over an entire game, but they are investing 3 mana and sacrificing another creature every single time, which sure, Black wants to sacrifice creatures, but I still think it's fair. Or let me say, I still think it's fine to unban. I don't think any of the cards on this list are fair, but I think that's fine. Rathalos, Llanowar Emissary. It's unique in its ability to consistently provide access to 6 mana on turn 3 as a commander. Regardless of which cards are played in the rest of the deck, this card is banned for doing too much too fast with minimal deck building restrictions. This is an easy stay banned. So this is add green to your mana pool for each forest you control. If you are playing a mono green deck, you are playing forests. Making it on turn 3. Yes, just as they said, 6 mana on turn 3. I am okay with this being banned because it coming out of the command zone on turn 2 makes it that is you have to remove Rathalos, or you probably have lost your chance in going and keeping pace with the table or with the player. If they would ever bring back Banned as Commander, this is another card that I think would be fine in the 99. Because green has many other cards that produce much more mana than this would in the form of Selvala and Circle of Dreams Druid, or even Gaia's Cradle, which I think Gaia's Cradle should be banned. So yeah, keep it banned unless you bring back Banned as Commander. Scheherazade. It seems like kind of fun, wacky spell that Commander wants to promote in the format. Unfortunately, resolving it is something of a logistical nightmare in most circumstances, and the spell ends up causing a lot of bad experiences, as players seem to love copying and recurring it, turning the game into a slog. So, I'm going to read the Oracle text instead of what's written on the card. Players play a Magic subgame using their libraries as their deck. Each player who doesn't win the subgame loses half their life rounded up. Keep this banned. This takes up needless time, and while it'd be a funny ha-ha to play it once or twice, the third through how many ever other times you play against it would be miserable as hell. Yeah, keep this banned. Sundering Titan. There are many lands that players would love to see leaving the battlefield, but Sundering Titan doesn't target those. Decks that blink or bounce Sundering Titan can utilize this effect repeatedly, leading to an environment where it's nearly impossible for opponents to keep basic lands in play. Basic land destruction is a predictably unpopular mechanic, especially in an environment when you don't know the people you're playing against. Unban it. So what it does, it's an 8-mana spell that when it enters or leaves the battlefield, choose a land of each basic land type, then destroy those lands. The reason why I'm okay with unbanning this card is twofold. One, it's 8 mana. Like I said, most cards that are 7 or more, I'm okay with unbanning. 2, we have quite a few cards that now make all lands all basic land types, so it does go and punish those that are greedy enough to go and fix their mana base in that way. I know I say greedy and fixing mana base, which are kind of diametrically opposed, but yeah, I think it's greed when you're just trying to go and do that through making everything the same basic land type. I understand that you could very well be blinking this and doing degenerative things with it. However, that's where pregame conversations and rule zeros take part. And I think when the rules committee goes and pushes rule zero conversations, cards like this should be part of it, and we should be able to choose whether or not it's a play experience we want to be involved in. Sway of the Stars. It's 10 mana, which is going to probably lead me to go and already tell you what I want to do with it. However, casting Sway of the Stars has the effect of completely negating the game that was in progress before its resolution. Sway adds time to the game and takes away action. You might as well shuffle up and play a new game. So, 10 mana, each player shuffles his or her hand, graveyard, and permanents he or she owns into his or her library, then draws 7 cards. Each player's life total becomes 7. So, it is possible to play Sway of the Stars as a game ender. And I think with the Worldfire and how Worldfire has performed, this leads to it being an easy unban for me. Essentially, what you want to do is flow all your mana and have a commander in the command zone that can take advantage of the 7 life. If you don't have a commander in the command zone that doesn't take advantage of life totals becoming 7, then this card shouldn't be in your deck anyway. And with Worldfire coming and becoming legal and doing absolutely nothing in the format, this shows that cards like Sway of the Stars can do the same thing. Sylvan Primordial. Sometimes considered an attempt to fix Primetime, it ended up being just as bad and sometimes worse. It can only get forests, but accelerates by 2 to 3 lands while knocking other players even further behind. Often flickered out to repeat the effect, the resulting mana gap is usually insurmountable. And Sylvan Primordial is yet another example of a card which looks fun for the builder, but makes games repetitive. So it's 7 mana, has reach, and when it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, destroy target non-creature permanent that player controls. For each permanent destroyed this way, search your library for a forest card and put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This one's a hard one for me. It is 7 mana and removes 3 things from your opponent. And it does it in a very green way because it is destroying non-creatures, and it does ramp 3. I am of the opinion that if I were to be building the ban list, I probably would be unban this because it is a 7 mana spell that does change and end the game. And because this is my ban list, I would vote to unban it. It isn't as easy as that, and I'm okay with it staying banned, but 7 mana cards that effectively change the game and allow you to go and take control of a game, I'm okay with. Sure, it could go and put you up 6 mana on your opponents, a 6 mana swing, because they each remove 1 and you gain 3, but I am okay with that. Time Vault. It's a card that saw many changes to its rules text over the years in an attempt to remove the ability to easily take infinite turns with simple untap effects like Voltaic Key or Twiddle, which has finally reverted the card to its printed and broken text just prior to its banning in Commander. So, it enters tapped, doesn't untap during your untap step, and if you would begin your turn while Time Vault is tapped, you may skip that turn instead. If you do untap Time Vault, taking an extra turn after this one. It's infinite turns. The problem with Time Vault isn't what the card does, it's the mana value that Time Vault is printed at. If Time Vault was 5 mana, I would say unban this card. If it was anything more than 5 mana, I would say unban this card. Anything less, it deserves to be banned. Keep Time Vault banned, easy as can be. Time Walk. It's part of the Power 9, and it's banned for a lot of that reasons. And it is the main reason why it's banned. However, I think it does need to stay banned for another reason. It is a 2 mana extra turn spell. Extra turns should be 5 mana, unless there's the drawback of you losing the game on your extra turn, like Final Fortune. It needs to stay banned. Tinker. Tinker's ability to get high-cost artifacts into play in the very early game often results in games ending extremely quickly or being locked down to the point where players cannot interact meaningfully. Because Tinker's power is tied to the artifacts that are being cheated into play, its power increases over time as artifact designs become more powerful. So it's 3 mana. At the time you play it, you have to sacrifice an artifact, but then you search your library for an artifact card and put that artifact into play, shuffle your library afterwards. It's a 3 mana artifact tutor directly to the battlefield. I don't think that we can be trusted with this card. I think that it would make for miserable play patterns because of the cards it can get. What is giving me pause about this is we do the same thing in black with creatures, where as early as turn 1 or 2, we're getting a creature that costs 7+ mana into play that that essentially goes and works the game. I don't, with it being blue and it being artifacts, I don't like that we are punishing one card type over another when we let a creature-based strategy do it, and that creature-based strategy could be just as broken. However, I do recognize the kind of cards that Tinker can get. You know what? Unban it. I recognize that it's broken, but we need to apply the ban list fairly. Tolarian Academy's power is tied to the abundance and ease of access to cheap artifacts in the early stages of the game. This often creates 2 or more colored mana on turn 1 and continues to scale throughout the game with no downside or additional cost at untap. Yeah, this needs to be banned. It's broken. Turn 1 Soul Ring, which I think Soul Ring should be banned if Mana Crypt's banned. With Tolarian Academy and to turn 2 Tolarian Academy, makes it that without any other artifacts, you do have the access to 4 mana on turn 2. And just with one more artifact, it goes, say you go turn 1 Soul Ring into Arcane Signet, turn 2 Tolarian Academy, you're already at 6 mana, and that's only playing 2 spells. So yeah, Tolarian Academy needs to be banned. Trade Secrets. Trade Secrets is a flag bearer for the banning principle of cards which interact poorly with the multiplayer nature of the format, as it's a cheap spell that allows 2 players to collude, draw unlimited cards, and then box the other players out of the game. So if you don't know what Trade Secrets does, it's 3 mana, target opponent draws 2 cards, then you draw up to 4 cards. That opponent may repeat this process as many times as he or she chooses. Because of the way that Commander works, this card has to stay banned. Because you know what's going to happen is that your opponent is going to go and continue to repeat the process until they have their one in hand, and then they're going to stop it. And even if they don't, say this only resolves once, this is still 3. You go draw 2. They draw 2. You draw 4. The 2 of you are up 6 cards on the rest of the table. It's not fair in any sense of the word. Upheaval. Games of Commander are expected to go long. It's not uncommon to see players cast spells for 10+ mana. Upheaval is both an emergency reset which leaves the game right back at square one and a way to get ahead in the game by floating mana. Bouncing everything, then replaying your hand while leaving everyone else stuck at nothing gives no real way to interact with it besides counter magic. So, when it comes to Upheaval, it's a 6 mana card, 4 and 2 blue, Return all permanents to their owner's hands. The reason why Upheaval is banned is because it's all permanents and not just all non-land permanents. If this said all non-land permanents, this card would be completely fair and would be played without a problem. When you're resetting the game on turn 6, you're taking a game that should be over by turn 10 and turning a game that will not finish until turn 15 or 16. Sure, you can get ahead when you cast this card, but more often than not, this is just going to go and grind the game to a halt, something that we're all trying to go and avoid. So, keep Upheaval banned. And the final card on the list is Yawgmoth's Bargain. Yawgmoth's Bargain abuses Commander's higher life totals, making the life payment essentially trivial. It too easily allows for access to a large portion of one's deck without having to guess how far you need to go, and leaves the mana up for casting the cards drawn right away. So it's a 6-mana spell, skip your draw step, pay 1 life, draw a card. You know what? Unban it. It's 6 mana. When you allow Necropotence to be unbanned and it's 3 mana, and sure, Necropotence is a delayed trigger where you have to wait until the end step to draw the card. I understand not wanting to go why they're different, but still. It's the 3 mana extra difference should make it that this is allowed to be played. I fully agree with Necropotence being unbanned. I'm not Necropotence being unbanned. Yawgmoth's Bargain being unbanned because of it being 6 mana. I understand it's abusable, but that's part of what makes Commander fun. Playing abusable cards that are not played anywhere else. So I know that I went through a lot of cards and gave my opinion on a lot of them. And you saw a lot that I want to ban and a lot that I want to unban. Which ones do you agree with me on? Which ones do you not agree with me on? And as always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.